different kind of gild.
Stone Age.
If you gild something, what do you do? If I take something and it's gilded, that basically means it is made to be like gold. So, like if you take something and you wrap it in a golden paper, basically, and cover it and shrink to whatever you're putting it on, that's gilding something. So it makes it look shiny. But is it gold? No, it's like gold leaf. You know, so it's covered in gold, but it's not gold. So that's what this Gilded Age is. We had a whole bunch of very rich guys and wealthy Americans, and the idea of America, you know, to outsiders was this golden cities and streets paved with gold, all this stuff. But reality wasn't gold, right? A lot of these people that came here suffered and struggled, and so that's kind of what this Gilded Age is all about. It is an era where you've got, you know, one of our most active political times, where lots of people loved politics. It was entertainment for most of them. They'd have several day rallies for politicians and other things going on. So that's all part of this Gilded Age as well. And then we do see, because there are so many people involved in politics, a lot of changes. And people trying to reform and kind of make politics more democratic, so more people have a say in what's going on. So we'll look at a lot of the terms here as we get into that as well. The notes are on Moodle, okay, so you could go to Moodle at the bottom of section or the unit 3. You'll see the notes, and so you can bring them up, follow along that way if you'd like. Okay, our goals. Well, we'll talk about muckrakers. Our goals for the day are to find out what were politics like in the Gilded Age, what reforms were being enacted, what were the problems in the city governments, and what successes did these reformers have. And they did have a lot. A lot of our political reforms that we have today, and the ability to get rid of politicians or to, you know, vote directly on laws or take laws off the books, all of that comes from this progressive era. Again, if I move too fast and you're taking notes, you can catch up. Just tell me when I'm there. If not, it is on Moodle, so you can catch up that way too if you need to. Okay, Gilded Age politics. This was, like I said, a very active time in America where you had politicians, the Republicans and Democrats, that were out and being supported by large rallies. And neither party was successful in dominating this Gilded Age. You had a switching back and forth from Democratic control to Republican control very often. You'd have politicians giving 3-hour speeches. Would you guys love to go see Mitt Romney or President Obama give a 3-hour speech?
Oh, yes.
But again, you're talking about an era where there's no television, there's no radio, and so politicians would come in on these 3-day rallies, and they would have, you know, a festival basically around the political rally. People wanted things to do, so they entertained through politics, and they gave these very entertaining speeches where they were, you know, rallies where they were hooping and hollering and telling what they do and getting people excited.
Make money.
Most Americans were worried about the power of these special interests and big business. Sound familiar? It's still a major concern in politics. And reformers that were active were really interested in trying to end corruption. You know, big business was really powerful. When you have a 3-day political rally and all of this going on, where'd that money come from for that political rally? Big business. Well, probably from support of big businesses. They don't use taxpayer dollars for those things. You could give money to them. And they had a whole lot less restriction on who could give and how much you could give to a politician. You know, so today, if I give money to a politician, I'm limited in what I can actually give. There's a set amount, I can't give more than that. to a single politician. Why do we limit what you can give to a single politician?
So you can't run it?
Yeah, basically to try and stop, overly influencing politicians. Those rules weren't there yet. So if I'm John Rockefeller, I can basically give you $10 million and go win the presidency. No rules, kids. And then if I want some laws that help my oil company, I'm going to be knocking on your door for sure.
What if you were just like, nope?
You had that option. He says, okay, well, I'm not going to support you anymore. And I'm going to pay somebody else to run against you. So you can do it for sure. You could be that politician, say, I appreciate your support, but I'm going to vote what's best for the country. Hopefully that's what they do. Not always the case.
I would be the worst president.
If Bill Gates wants to run for president, what's his limit on what he can spend?
$1 billion.
Nothing. You can spend as much of your own money as you want on your politician. Because you're allowed to influence yourself. I don't know that he'd win, but he might have a good, solid campaign and have backing from his own pocketbook.
Kind of a quiet guy.
No, he does a lot of philanthropy. I mean, he gives a lot of money away. Huh? Go back? Sure. Okay. And because of that, the unrestricted giving to politicians, that's why we have the rules now. Corporations can give a set amount to a single politician. Individuals can give a set amount to, I think it's $10,000 or something like that, to a politician. And what we're running into today is you can give a lot more money to special interest groups in like the Republican National Party because that's not one person. And so you get some people giving millions and millions of dollars to the Republican Party, and then they run all these elections.
I would just have me give 10,000, my wife give 10,000, and all my kids give 10,000.
Well, people do that. Good.
My child wants to do
Okay. To try and fix things up, make it a little bit more fair, we start to see some reform in the enacting of a civil service commission. This basically was trying to end the idea of patronage. You ever heard that term before, patronage?
Yes.
Patronage is a system basically where if I win the presidency, then I get to hire a bunch of people to help fill out offices throughout the government. And I'm going to give those to the people that help me win. So if you were the vice president of my campaign committee, then you're going to become the secretary of education. Or you're going to become some high-ranking official inside the government because I'm rewarding you for helping me become president. That's patronage. Getting a job because you helped the person get there. And they wanted to end that because that had been the way that we had operated throughout the history of the United States, where basically to the victor go the spoils. You ever heard that?
Nope.
An old term basically meaning that if you win, you get to create these jobs and help the people that helped you. That's patronage. Well, when President Garfield was killed by someone who thought that he helped Garfield win the presidency, and others have been disappointed by either getting jobs or not getting the right jobs, and most of America was saying we're getting a whole bunch of people in the government that aren't qualified. So this Garfield's assassination kind of brought it to light, but others were saying we need a way to figure out how to get good qualified people in the government so that there isn't corruption, so that the government is more efficient, and we're not spending all this tax dollars on bad government. Now there's a cartoon showing that you have 100 jobs you've created, they all appear to be family and friends. That's patronage.
Wait, so we've had 3 presidents assassinated?
Yeah. Lincoln, Garfield,
I honestly thought it was one.
Harris, I think 4.
And so did I.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
Okay, so what they do in the Civil Service Commission, guys, is they create an agency that's going to look out for government jobs and make sure people are qualified. So they're going to look into their backgrounds. Are they qualified? It's not going to be an appointed position anymore. And you're going to have to pass a civil service test to see if you're qualified for certain positions. It used to be a much wider ranging array of jobs were under the civil service test. It used to be if you wanted to become a postmaster or a mailman, you had to pass the civil service test to see that you were qualified. You couldn't just get that because you know somebody. They wanted to make sure you're qualified for that position, and that's where the Civil Service Commission comes in. Okay. We also start to see a major change in the government's job or the government's involvement in the economy. We start seeing regulation of business. We had not done that. What was the policy of the government before this? Laissez-faire. So the government had not been involved in nearly anything that was going on in the economy. But we passed the Interstate Commerce Act. We passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, both of which are set up to regulate business. And the Interstate Commerce Act was established to regulate the railroads and end the pools and rebate systems. So now when railroads want to raise their rates, they have to get approval. They couldn't just give certain people discounts and other people raise the rates. They start to be regulated through the Interstate Commerce Act. So the federal government basically said anything being traveling or being sold across state lines, that's interstate commerce, becomes regulated by the federal government. Did you guys know, like, if I go into Richmond and I buy a 12-pack of beer and come back to Ohio, that is a violation of federal law?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes.
Why?
You're taking alcohol across state lines.
And you can't do it with wood either, can you?
Huh?
You can't like chop the
Certain things, yeah, are regulated. Any trade across state lines is regulated. Yeah, and I know someone that were having a festival, a fundraising festival through a church group, and they went, and it was going to be like a Monte Carlo, and so they were going to have some alcohol for adults and stuff, and they went into Richmond and bought some beer and other things and came back across state lines, and they got busted. And so he had to pay a major fine because he did it. It wasn't for terrible intent. He wasn't even going to sell it, but that's illegal. It happens. They can't catch everybody. But if you pull into it, and there's police or the federal people are there, the tobacco, alcohol, firearm group, if they're there and they see my license plate is Ohio plate and I walk out with beer, they might follow me across the state line and arrest me. Possibility. And now with the trains, all of them went across state lines, so they start to be regulated by the federal government. Now, if it's any kind of trade within the state lines, what is that? Yeah, that's intrastate trade, and that's regulated by who?
The state.
The state government, exactly. Okay, the Sherman Antitrust Act was established to try and make sure that we had fair practices. And we did the essay question on the test talking about competition. That's why the Sherman Antitrust went into effect, saying trusts are purposed to create a monopoly. If you're a monopoly, you're definitely trying to limit competition, and we want competition, so we're going to regulate trusts or make them illegal. Standard Oil Trust, the biggest one, where you see the picture there with Rockefeller. You've got Roosevelt coming in, as you see, or this is Rockefeller, and look at the Capitol building. What do they make it look like? Huh? It's kind of golden, but what's on the Capitol that's not normally there, guys?
Oil.
Well, the smokestacks, right? Like it's a factory, and he's controlling all of it because he's so powerful and so influential. And so they want to get that out, so they want to regulate trade. He breaks the Sherman Antitrust Act, breaks Standard Oil into like 10 different companies. Exxon, Mobil, another one, a major company that used to be Standard Oil that's still around today. So a lot of our, it's not BP. BP is British Petroleum, so that's a different one. All right, progressives and their goals. Progressives and their goals. The major goals of the progressive era was to major goals were reform city governments, get rid of boss rule.
I didn't order those.
We talked about this before, that the bosses that were so powerful and so popular because they helped the poor. That was one of the main goals of progressive, was to get rid of that system. And in reality, they almost had to have that system in place, because if you have a boss running things, you can get things done quickly. And cities had to move quickly. They were growing so fast that they had to have someone in charge. When you had to have a vote for everything that's happening in your government, it's not very efficient. It may be better and less corrupt, but it's not very efficient. And so they needed someone running it, and so bosses were the way they did it. They found out that's way too corrupt, and so they tried to get away from it. And how do most cities now, how do we get someone to run the city government?
Mayors,
Okay, we elect mayors. And if they do a bad job, what do?
Fire.
Well, we don't
Overthrow them.
We don't overthrow or fire them. They're elected. So what do we do?
Unelect them.
Yeah, just elect somebody else. Exactly. Don't vote for them again.
I like you.
That's the way we control the cities.
I'd like to be a team
For what?
drug man.
Depending on the city, it's a city rule, but most places, yeah.
I'll run for mayor.
When I was a student in Miami, we had a student run, and we had a 19-year-old mayor of Oxford, I think it was.
That's nice.
And the way that he got elected was, he basically, you live, if you're a student in Miami, you live there for the majority of the year. So he had this big campaign to get students to register to vote in Oxford so that we could vote for him.
Did he do a good job? At least.
Guy seemed to do a fine job. I didn't see any major problems.
I'll just screw it.
The handy papers.
It's Chipotle right here.
The handy papers like, no.
You don't make those decisions. The mayor, business have, you could try to attract a Chipotle right there to a place. That would be fine.
And a Panera Bread. And just all kinds of
I'm gonna start with like a factory or something first.
You got to have people with money to patronize those places, huh?
Well, I'm gonna have rich people come in.
Oh, there you go.
So live in
Attract
my
those.
town. Free houses. Kicking the poor people out.
Just walking, you need to leave.
Probably wouldn't get reelected with those
We got you a tent. So
plans.
there you go.
Give them a bag or something.
All right. Everybody have this?
It's a real nice tent. It's two-person.
It's like almost like the why they don't have the side.
Okay. To deal with this corruption, they created citizen groups called good government leagues, and they would police politicians, basically. They would try to replace politicians that were dishonest with honest ones. In Minneapolis, they sent a corrupt mayor to jail because they exposed his corruption and charged him with crimes, and he eventually went to jail for it.
It's crazy.
In Cleveland, they worked hard enough to get a mayor elected that would change the way Cleveland ran their utilities and set up services for the poor, so very proactive politicians. When you had a power company that was just running itself and trying to make money, they start regulating, say, okay, we're going to make this Cleveland electric company, the city's going to run it and regulate it, and since we can't have other power stations other than yours, we're going to regulate you. And you have this picture of political corruption to the right. Anybody know who that is? This happened in 08.
Sherrod Brown.
No, not Sherrod Brown. That is Rob Blagojevich. Ever heard of him?
Nope.
He was the governor of Illinois. He was charged and removed from governorship. When President Obama won the election in 08, he had been the senator from Illinois. And so the way it worked in Illinois was if you had a senator that was no longer able to finish their job, until you could have another election, the governor appointed a senator. Now, if you are a senator of the United States, that does many things for you. One, it gives you a pretty nice salary, like $170,000 a year. But if you're a U.S. senator, that gives you a $170,000 salary for life and health care for life. So this is a major, and you're one of 100 people that make this policy decisions for the U.S. government. So these guys are pretty powerful. And Blagojevich gets to choose that guy. So lots of people want it. What he did to get himself in trouble was he kind of sent out messages to people saying, you know, I get to appoint this person as the next senator from Illinois, and I'm basically going to sell it. Anybody who wants, you know, for the right price, I will appoint you senator. And so, you know, that got out. People found out that he's trying to sell a Senate seat, which is highly illegal and corrupt.
It's not
and so
that illegal.
he got caught. He never served jail time, but he did get caught, lose his position. Never got to
Probably
sell the
broke
Senate
now.
seat. What?
Did you say he's broke now?
I don't know that he's broke. I don't know what he's doing now. I have no idea.
Probably like shoplifting or something.
Correct, Julie.
Yeah. That's what happens.
He may run for office and win again. Who knows?
I sell crack all the time.
Can you run if you committed a felony? Can you run
No.
again? Yes, you can.
Can you really?
Yeah. The only real restriction in voting is you just have to win the election. You know, hopefully the voters will say we don't want a felon in office, but you could win.
Could you be a president?
Yeah, you could. Yes, you could be.
Well, we got a couple.
Yeah, you could be not able to vote in your state because you committed a felony. Some states won't let felons vote, but you could be a politician in that state if you got elected.
As long as they're strapped.
I'd go with Mike Tyson.
During that whole presidential debate,
You would vote for Mike Tyson?
point that knife right at him.
I don't think he'd be a great politician.
I think it would.
I think I don't know.
3 years for everyone.
All right,
You just see a little bit.
There you go.
Put something on me.
good. Okay. So good government leagues are created to try and make sure we get politicians we want. Another thing that starts happening is we have this whole group of people called muckrakers that come out and they're working for the newspapers and they're writing books. And basically their goal is that they're taking this realist idea that we talked about before a step further. Well, now they're almost the investigative journalists that we see today on, 60 Minutes and other things where they're exposing corruption. They go in and they do an investigation and then they expose the whole thing. Newspaper reporters would go and take pictures of slums and live in the tenements for a while and tell what it's like. And so people would see that it's bad and we need to make sure we get some rules on housing so that people are living safer lives. They also exposed this to the middle class who had time, money, and sympathy for the poor and would then start to take action to fix them, getting active in the Salvation Army or other organizations to try and help the poor. You had Ida Tarbell, who was one of the most famous of the muckrakers. She writes a book about Standard Oil and how unfair practices are causing them to be this monopoly, but they're also crushing the rest of the oil businesses and not letting competition take place. And she had been a witness to this. Her father had been put out of business by John Rockefeller, so she kind of had a motive to show what these practices do to people. Upton Sinclair is probably the most famous. He wrote the book The Jungle, and that's a picture of the jungle, the title there, where he goes in and works in a meatpacking industry in Chicago and writes about his experiences there. His intent was to show how bad it was for the workers working in these factories. But what happened was people read the book and they saw that it wasn't great for the people working there, but they also saw that it wasn't safe for the people eating the meat. Because if you got lots of renderings and byproducts of meat laying on the floor after they're doing making hamburger and doing things, what does that attract?
Mice.
Yeah, lots of mice, rats, flies, all kinds of stuff. So they had problems in the meat. These meat packing plants. They would just throw lots of rat poison on the floor so so that they would keep the rats away.
That's healthy.
Yeah, a lot of that rat poison gets into the meat,
Man.
not real safe. And sometimes mice and other things get into that meat and they throw it through the processors.
Sick.
Human fingers get ripped off and it goes into the meat and they don't shut down and redo everything.
That's so yummy.
And so some of these stories start getting out there through this book. And people are freaking out. They're saying, "Oh my gosh, I've never eaten meat. You know, all that stuff's happening. We need to do things to make sure that it's not like this." And so, because of that, you see the Clean Meat Act and other laws going into place to try and make sure these things are clean. And now, you are regulated by federal regulators if you're doing any kind of food processing. Yeah, my sister-in-law used to work for Imes. And they said, in that factory in Lewisburg, they said, yeah, that's the cleanest place in the world because there's federal laws. You have to have a certain amount of sanitation. If not, they shut you down. So nowadays, it's pretty clean, and they make sure of it. But back then, they didn't. And we all found out about it through The Jungle.
That's my favorite book.
Your favorite book? If you were reading about that, how would you feel about your meat? Who would you? You know, and what happened? What happened if people got sick from it?
Oh well.
They got like
Well, they could get whatever was in it, right? They could die from rat poison. But our medical system wasn't high tech enough to figure out what a lot of these things were coming from, and so we couldn't track it. Today we have that outbreak of from peanut butter. What was that? Was that the salmonella? Yeah, they had salmonella.
Yeah.
They could track everything about that peanut butter. They knew which brands that were affected. They knew what dates that these were produced. I mean, they could come out and put the news out and everybody can get rid of the bad peanut butter. They couldn't do that before. There was no tracking. And so people got sick. Okay. Another thing progressive reformers wanted was to try and improve American life. So if you're a progressive, what are you working for? Take just the word itself.
to progress.
To progress, yeah, for progress, and in their ideas, they want to progress American society, make it better. And so we have this progressive era from the late 1800s through 1917. 1917 ends the progressive era because that's when World War I starts for America. They're never one unified group. There are all kinds of different groups working for progress. They definitely drew some inspiration from the church and science. So that's different. Church and science typically weren't friendly, but they had some inspiration from both. They said, all right, let's help our neighbor. You know, a very Christian thing to do. So let's go out and help the poor. Let's do these things. And they also said, all right, let's do this smartly. You know, how can we affect the most change? You know, if we go out and feed the poor, is that the best thing we can do? Would we be better if we create jobs and fix housing? And let's figure out what's best.
Let's throw money.
And so they start using analysis and statistics to try and track, all right, how can we help the most people? And that's what the progressive era is all about. They're trying to regulate business, trying to clean up corruption, trying to help create laws that will, you know, assist people. So there was no progressive major party in America. It was part of both parties. It was groups inside politics that were trying to fix things. But you see that still today. I mean, some people would say, you know, that Obama's a progressive. Why would they call Obama a progressive?
Because he wants to get health care.
Okay, because he's changing government, thinking that this is going to help the people. We need health care, so they create laws and they create new things the government's going to do, and so that would be seen as a progressive movement.
I'm progressive. I want to make money.
We're good? here are progressive ideas, okay? But told you they were not just a party. They were part of both parties. But here are the things that they really worked to try to do. They wanted to improve education. They thought that would be a fundamental change that would help society. Another part of the progressive idea is that women could be politically active, which is going to lead us to what that women don't have yet at this point.
Women's rights.
Okay, women's rights and women's right to vote, which they don't have yet, which they will get right after the end of the year. But they believed women were morally superior to men. Women were more moral, so they should be active. If we want to have a good society with high moral standards, then women would be the right ones to do that. So they get active in the progressive movement. Well, I don't think women are any more morally superior than men. I think that's a pretty individual thing, but
I'm superior to everyone.
another thing they really worked for was the end of child labor. And then something you're going to learn more about when you listen to or read the part from your tablets will be this Wisconsin idea for state politics. Wisconsin under Lafayette, Governor Lafayette, they enact a whole bunch of different policies that the rest of the country watches and says, I don't know what the heck's going to happen with these, but they were successful. So a lot of them became part of other states' policies too. So Wisconsin kind of led the way through this progressive era under Lafayette.
Get over it, son.
Wisconsin, they start regulating the railroads inside their state. They start creating workers' safety boards, other things that are going on inside their state. And people think, okay, they're regulating. Businesses are just going to leave Wisconsin because they're not going to put up with these laws or go do stuff in other states. That didn't happen. Actually, the economy got a little better, and so that's why a lot of states went to it. They were thinking that this over-regulation would kill business, and it didn't. Okay, the successes we see from the progressive reform era are primaries. We just went through this in the summer. What are the primaries? Each state has a primary this summer, and early spring too, I guess. What are primaries? Nick, you know what a primary is?
No.
We had them. We had a Republican primary and a Democratic primary. What are we choosing during primaries?
Oh,
The people who are going to be president.
Okay, the people who are going to be the candidate for each party, right? What happened before the primaries, where it used to be a decision that the Republican Party made and the Democratic Party made. And they call them these backroom decisions, where these rich guys that were the people running the Republican Party would get together and say, all right, guys, who are we going to run for president this year? And they talk about it, and they're going to fund it and work for it, so they would just pick a guy. And so it wouldn't be elected, it wouldn't be someone chosen by the voters, it would be someone chosen by the party. Primaries changed that. Now we have a primary system where people are voting in each state from a list of people that are running for president, instead of just being chosen by the leadership. So they made it more democratic, more fair, more people voted to try and choose the candidate. That's a primary. An initiative. Initiatives are when states like Ohio have initiatives where if we wanted to have a term limit, we want to say, okay, anybody running for House of Representatives or General Assembly, we call it in Ohio, they can only serve a 4-year term and then they're done forever. If we wanted to pass that law, we maybe could go to the General Assembly and say, hey guys, would someone introduce this law and pass it? Would it be likely that they would want to pass that law? No, they probably want to stay and do their job and do it over and over and over. So they wouldn't pass it, but in Ohio we could get enough signatures and put that to a vote of the whole people, and if the people of Ohio pass it, it becomes law. So that's initiative. A way that people can pass a law without the state government. So if it's a majority of the state voters want it, it can happen. A referendum would be something that's put on the ballot by the politicians, but they want to vote by the people. Okay? So we could say, like in Ohio, we took this recently, and we put it before the voters of Ohio. We wanted to allow gambling in Ohio. Remember that?
Yeah.
And did it pass?
Nope.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. We have a casino in Columbus that opens today, I think, or yesterday. One in Cleveland is working now, and one in Cincinnati that should be opening sometime next year. So we did pass a law allowing casino gambling in Ohio through a referendum. A recall is a way to remove an elected official through public. If we're disappointed with someone, we have a policy that we can get in there and remove them. And that's how. Remember Governor Schwarzenegger in California?
Yeah.
That's how he got to be governor. They recalled Governor Gary Gray or something like that. But Governor Gray was removed through recall. They had an open election. Schwarzenegger won. He won several elections after that. That's how he got there. The progressives also passed the 16th Amendment, which we all love, and income taxes.
It's my favorite.
The federal income tax system was created during this 16th Amendment. What is it? What is our income tax? How does it work for the federal government?
Take a certain percentage of your
Yeah.
income.
It's a percentage of your income. That's what changed. It used to be the federal government could tax, but they could only tax everybody the same. And people started saying the rich can afford to pay more, and they changed it to this graduated system where if you make a lot of money, you pay a lot higher percentage tax. If you make below a certain amount, you don't pay any tax. If you make this much, you pay 20%, this much 35%, and then they top out. And so that's the graduated income tax in the 16th Amendment. The 17th Amendment had to do with how we elected our senators. It used to just be states chose and send them. Then they opened it up, and now we vote for our senators from Ohio and other states. And in the rebate system. So all of these are successes of this progressive era movement. And almost all of them, you can see, tried to get power away from a small group of people and give it to larger groups of people. Try to make it more fair. Okay. All right. Now what I want you to do is the e-pad. Get your pads out. We're going to have a lesson on here and questions to answer on Moodle. Show you what I want you to do on here. Okay, when you look at the Moodle page, you have this section that says Progressives and the Gilded Age. The targets are here, and you have the origins of progressivism. You can click this one, the top one. Guys in the back, pay attention. The top one where it says Origins of Progressivism, that is the video. If you want to watch the slides and listen to it, you click that one. If you just want to read it, you have text only. Same thing for state, municipal, and local reform. You can watch it and listen to it or read it. And then when you're done, I want you to go to Questions on the Gilded Age. There's 5 questions you need to answer by next class. Okay? So you need to read or listen to and then answer the questions where it says Questions on the Gilded Age. That's your assignment.
How big are these, like, paragraphs?
Page.
Or give you the size and
No. You can listen to it if you choose to.
Well,
Did you